3 days. That's all I had left. After 42 years of walking through the same front gates every weekday morning, I could practically navigate the factory with my eyes closed. Every machine had its own rhythm. Every hallway carried memories. Every face reminded me of another year gone by. I'd spent more time inside Walker Industrial Components than I had in any house I'd ever lived in. When I parked my pickup truck that Tuesday morning, the sky over Chicago was painted in soft shades of orange. The air had that crisp September chill that always reminded me football season had arrived. I sat behind the steering wheel for a moment, sipping the last of my coffee and smiling to myself. 3 days. On Friday, I'd hand over my badge, shake a few hands, and begin the retirement my late wife, Susan, and I had dreamed about for years. Life had other plans. As soon as I stepped through the employee entrance, something felt different. People who usually greeted me with a smile suddenly looked away. Conversation stopped when I walked into the break room. Even Carl from shipping, a man who'd hugged me after Susan's funeral, barely nodded before staring into his coffee cup. I told myself everyone was just busy. Around 9:30, my desk phone rang. Frank. It was Melissa from reception. Mr. Collins would like to see you in his office. I smiled. Guess he's finally ready to talk about Friday's retirement party. There was a pause. I think you should go now. Her voice sounded strange. Uneasy. I walked upstairs without giving it much thought. Richard Collins had been plant director for almost 8 years. We'd never been close friends, but we'd always respected each other. At least, that's what I'd believed. When I reached his office, the door was already open. Richard stood beside the window with his arms folded. 2 uniformed security officers stood silently near the wall. My stomach tightened. Morning, I said with an awkward chuckle. What's with the audience? No one laughed. Richard motioned toward the chair across from his desk. Please sit down, Frank. Something inside me whispered that my life was about to change. I just didn't know how completely. I lowered myself into the chair, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Richard didn't sit right away. Instead, he opened a thick black folder, carefully removed several documents, and placed them in front of me. One page immediately caught my eye. Notice of termination. I blinked. Once. Twice. The words refused to make sense. There has to be some mistake, I said quietly. Richard finally looked at me. I wish there were. He slid another stack of papers across the desk. Printed spreadsheets. Inventory reports. Purchase orders. Approval forms. Each one carried my employee ID. My digital signature. My login credentials. We've completed an internal investigation, he said in the same calm voice people use when discussing tomorrow's weather. The evidence indicates you've been manipulating inventory records for several years. I stared at him. What? Our preliminary estimate is approximately $480,000 in missing inventory. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain simply refused to believe what I had just heard. You honestly think I stole $500,000? Richard didn't answer. Instead, he folded his hands together. The company has no choice but to terminate your employment immediately. One of the security officers stepped forward. My badge suddenly felt heavy against my shirt. I've worked here 42 years. Silence. I trained half the supervisors in this building. Silence. I buried my wife while still showing up every Monday because this company needed me. Silence. Richard finally spoke. This decision wasn't personal. I looked directly into his eyes. It became personal the second you stopped believing me. I emptied my desk into a cardboard box. A framed photograph of Susan. A coffee mug my daughter Emily had given me 10 Christmases earlier. An old calculator with faded buttons. A pocket notebook. 42 years of memories reduced to a box I could carry with one hand. Nobody came over. Nobody asked questions. People watched from behind computer monitors. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked relieved it wasn't happening to them. As the security guards escorted me across the factory floor, every machine still hummed exactly as it had an hour earlier. The factory hadn't changed. My entire life had. By lunchtime, the story had spread. By dinner, it was online. A local business reporter published an article. Longtime employee terminated amid fraud investigation. They didn't mention my decades of service. They didn't mention the awards. Only the accusation. My phone stopped ringing. Neighbors who usually waved suddenly found something fascinating on the other side of the street. It's amazing how quickly people rewrite your life once they hear a headline. Emily called that evening. Dad? Her voice shook. I saw the article. I figured you would. They're lying. Those 3 words nearly broke me. Because she never hesitated. Not for 1 second. I didn't do it. I know. You don't even want to ask if it's true. She sighed. When I was 8 years old, I watched you return an envelope with $1,200 someone accidentally left in our mailbox. I smiled despite myself. You remember that? I remember everything. There was a long silence. Then she asked the question I couldn't answer. What are you going to do? I looked around the quiet living room. Susan's favorite chair still sat by the window. Her knitted blanket remained folded across the armrest. For the first time since losing her, the house felt completely empty. I honestly don't know. The next morning, I called Human Resources. No one returned my call. My retirement benefits had been frozen. My pension payments suspended. My health insurance cancelled pending the investigation. 42 years. Gone with a signature. A week later, I visited an attorney. After reviewing the documents, he leaned back in his chair. The paperwork against you is substantial. I didn't ask if it looked bad. No. You asked if I believed you. He nodded slowly. I've practiced law for 28 years. What does that tell you? It tells me guilty people usually try explaining everything. And? You keep asking why. He closed the file. That interests me. Over the following days, I couldn't stop replaying my final meeting. Something bothered me. Not what Richard had said. What he hadn't said. He never once asked for my explanation. He'd already decided I was guilty before I entered his office. That realization kept me awake every night. One rainy afternoon, while searching through old storage boxes in the basement, I found several dusty binders labeled Inventory Verification Logs. I almost threw them away. Then I remembered. Years earlier, I'd noticed occasional discrepancies between warehouse counts and corporate reports. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to bother me. I'd started printing monthly reconciliation reports for my own records. Mostly because computers sometimes lost files. Susan used to tease me. You trust paper more than people. Turns out. She was right. I carried the binders upstairs. Hours passed as I compared dates. Purchase orders. Shipment numbers. Approval codes. Then I saw it. One shipment listed as received in the company's records had never actually arrived. Another shipment appeared twice. Thousands of dollars. Then tens of thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. The numbers didn't match. Not even close. I wasn't looking at proof of my guilt. I was looking at proof someone had been changing records long before I was accused. For the first time since losing everything, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. The following morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. Frank. It was Mike Donovan, the company's former IT administrator. He'd retired the previous year. I heard what happened. So did everyone else. There was a pause. I don't believe it. Neither did Emily. Now Mike. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. I've been thinking about something, Mike continued. What? Your login records. What about them? They bothered me. Why? Because I built that system. I sat upright. And I don't think they could have been generated the way management claims. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Mike lowered his voice. I think someone wants your name on those reports. A chill ran down my spine. For the first time. This wasn't just about proving I was innocent. This was about uncovering who had sacrificed me to protect themselves. And I had a feeling the truth was buried much higher up than anyone imagined. Mike arrived at my house the next morning carrying a worn laptop that looked older than both of us. I never throw anything away, he said with a grin. Drives my wife crazy. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. It felt strange, almost unfamiliar. He set the laptop on my kitchen table and opened several archived files he'd backed up before retiring. When I left the company, I kept copies of system documentation, he explained. Nothing confidential. Just enough to remember how everything worked. He pointed to a diagram of the inventory software. Every inventory approval creates 3 records. I know. But only one of those records is visible to supervisors. I frowned. The other 2 are system logs. He nodded. And they're almost impossible to erase without administrator access. My heart started racing. You're saying someone could fake my approval. But they couldn't erase every digital footprint. Exactly. Over the next several days, Mike and I compared my printed records with his archived system logs. The deeper we dug, the worse it became. Inventory transfers had been altered after midnight. Approvals appeared while I was on vacation. Some transactions were recorded while I was attending Susan's funeral. I stared at one report in disbelief. They're saying I approved this shipment at 2:14 in the afternoon. Mike looked at another document. You were giving the eulogy at your wife's funeral. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. That wasn't just an error. It was proof. Someone had rewritten history. A week later, I received another unexpected phone call. Frank. It was Linda Morales from accounting. She sounded terrified. We can't talk on the phone. What happened? Can we meet somewhere? We met at a small diner nearly 30 miles outside the city. Linda kept checking the windows before she finally sat down. I've wanted to call you since the day you were fired. Then why didn't you? Because I was afraid. She slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside were copies of internal financial reports. Some were marked confidential. I looked up. Linda. They made me change them. My stomach tightened. Who? She swallowed hard. Richard. The plant director. And corporate finance. She rubbed her trembling hands together. They told me the discrepancies would disappear after the annual audit. What discrepancies? She looked directly into my eyes. The missing inventory. I felt my pulse quicken. They knew. They created it. Linda explained everything. For nearly 5 years, senior executives had inflated inventory values to make quarterly profits look stronger than they really were. When products disappeared, they created fake transfers. When auditors asked questions, they moved numbers between warehouses. Eventually the fraud became too large to hide. Someone needed to take the blame. Someone close enough to the records, but far enough from executive decisions. Someone respected enough that nobody would question the accusation. Someone retiring in 3 days. Me. I drove home in complete silence. Every memory suddenly made sense. Richard avoiding eye contact. The rushed investigation. The security guards already waiting. Nobody wanted the truth. They wanted a sacrifice. My attorney immediately contacted federal investigators. Within days, outside auditors arrived at Walker Industrial Components. Unlike the company's internal team, they weren't interested in protecting executives. They followed every transaction, every server log, every inventory adjustment, every deleted file, and every trail led to the executive offices. Not mine. 3 weeks later, I received another call. This time it wasn't from Mike or Linda. It was Richard. His voice sounded different. Smaller. "Frank, I'd like to meet." I almost laughed. "You had your meeting. This is important." "It was important when I asked you to believe me." "I couldn't." "No." I answered quietly. "You chose not to." After several seconds, he spoke again. "They've suspended me." I said nothing. "They've suspended several executives." Still nothing. Finally he whispered. "I think we made a mistake." I closed my eyes. A mistake is sending the wrong shipment. Silence. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. More silence. "What you did was destroy a man's life." I ended the call. The investigation lasted another month. When it was over, the company's board held a public press conference. I didn't want to attend. Emily insisted. "You spent 42 years earning your name." She squeezed my hand. "You deserve to hear them give it back." The board chairman stepped to the microphone. His voice echoed through the conference room. "Our investigation found no evidence that Mr. Frank Walker participated in any fraudulent activity." Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. He continued. "Mr. Walker was wrongfully terminated and falsely accused." Those words felt unreal. Then came the sentence I never expected. "On behalf of Walker Industrial Components, we offer Mr. Walker our deepest apology." No apology could return the weeks I'd spent wondering if my entire life had been erased. But it was a beginning. My pension was fully restored. Every retirement benefit was reinstated with interest. The company also offered a substantial financial settlement. People often ask if I accepted it. I did. Not because money could erase what happened, but because accountability should have a cost. A month later, something unexpected happened. Former coworkers called Emily. Not management. Not executives. The people I'd worked beside for decades. Machine operators. Warehouse clerks. Maintenance crews. Forklift drivers. They rented the community hall I'd originally planned to use for my retirement party. When I walked inside, nearly 200 people stood and applauded. Carl from shipping was the first to hug me. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have believed you." One by one, others said the same thing. Some cried. Some couldn't even meet my eyes. I realized forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to let someone else's failure define your future. That afternoon, Mike handed me a small wooden plaque. It wasn't expensive. Just simple oak with engraved brass. It read, 42 years of integrity. Nothing else. No fancy speech. No corporate logo. No signatures. Just the truth. I think I value that plaque more than every award the company ever gave me. Because this one came from people who knew my character. Not my job title. 6 months later, I finally did what Susan and I had always planned. I rented a small cabin on a quiet Wisconsin lake. Every morning, I carried a cup of coffee down to the dock before sunrise. No meetings. No deadlines. No inventory reports. Just still water and the sound of loons across the lake. Sometimes I think about those last 3 days before retirement. How quickly everything fell apart. But then I remember something even more important. The truth didn't save my career. It saved my name. And when you've spent a lifetime earning your reputation, there's no retirement gift more valuable than getting it back.